On this Tuesday night, the complex process to free the two Michaels. What can the federal government do diplomatically and legally?
Our foreign policy is being held hostage.
And what legal experts say the justice minister can do in the extradition proceeding against Meng Wanzhou. Ontario's first child to die with COVID-19.
It's a terrible thing.
And in the U.S., what Dr. Anthony Fauci fears is happening. One premier's pitch.
It's time to kick the CERB to the curb.
The incentive to get Manitobans back to work. Plus, the boxing gloves are off and the medical gloves are on.
I wanted to help and to make a difference.
A Canadian boxer punches in at long-term care homes.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with the mounting pressure on the federal government to take action in the case of two Canadians detained in China. Michael Kovrig's wife says her husband is in a fight for his life and is a pawn in a geopolitical game. In an interview with the CBC, she says the Minister of Justice has the power to end the extradition proceedings of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou, arrested in Vancouver at the request of American authorities. That could result in the release of the two Michaels, Kovrig and Spavor. China accuses Canada of being America's accomplice and has demanded Meng be released. Canada has consistently said the extradition process must proceed without political interference. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stephenson joins me. Mercedes, this is tricky ground diplomatically. What are the legal experts telling you?
Donna, high-profile legal minds say under the law, Canada's Justice Minister David Lametti does have the power to free Meng Wanzhou and end her extradition process right now if he wants to. That's a very different message than Canadians have been hearing from the federal government over the past 18 months. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government have said over and over they can't intervene to end Meng Wanzhou's extradition.
We function on a rule of law basis.
Continue to defend the rule of law.
We don't need to apologize or explain for the decisions taken by our independent justice system.
But one of Canada's most prominent immigration lawyers says that's not true.
The legislation couldn't be clearer. Section 23(3) of the Extradition Act simply says that the Minister of Justice may withdraw the authority to proceed at any time.
Brian Greenspan penned that in a legal opinion after being approached by Michael Kovrig's wife and former Supreme Court Justice Louise Arbour, as well as former Liberal Justice Minister Alan Rock, all frustrated by the government's claims that its hands are tied.
All we're saying is the right exists, the choice exists, the option exists.
Alan Rock says the government was burned in the SNC-Lavalin scandal and now is holding back from intervening in a case where they have legitimate authority.
Our two Canadian hostages are facing that danger in China. They're being subjected to a show trial. Criminal charges were laid last week in a court that has a 99% conviction rate.
Rock says it is in Canadian national interest to intervene, with lives on the line and economic fallout hitting the Canadian economy. Not to mention the muting of Canada's criticism of China on things like Hong Kong, even freezing a decision on how to proceed with 5G technology.
Our foreign policy is also being held hostage, and it's about time that that come to an end as well.
Others have criticized this approach as a hostage exchange and fear that it would send the wrong message to China, undermining a growing international consensus that countries must stand up to Beijing.
If we give in to this kind of menacing blackmail and coercion, then it sets a precedent which could lead to further incidents. It would simply embolden the Chinese government to do more of this kind of thing in future.
So, Donna, what is clear is that the minister can intervene. The question of whether or not he should do so is much more complicated.
Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa, thank you. Cases of COVID-19 are on the rise among young people in many places where restrictions are being lifted. And now Ontario is reporting its first death of a child with COVID-19. The exact age of the child has not been released. It was a female under the age of 20. Public health officials say she had underlying health conditions and tested positive for COVID-19, though that has not been declared as the cause of death.
It's a terrible thing to lose a child, but in some cases, I'm not saying specifically with respect to this case, but in some cases there are situations where there are other pre-existing conditions that may actually be the cause of the loss rather than COVID.
There are reports the EU is preparing to block American citizens from entering Europe because of that country's failure to control the outbreak of COVID-19. According to draft lists of acceptable travelers seen by the New York Times, Americans would be lumped in with Russians and Brazilians as unwelcome in Europe. The U.S. has almost 2.5 million cases and more than 120,000 people have died. Now, a new surge in cases has America's top health experts deeply worried. Jennifer Johnson reports.
Government doctors on the front line of the COVID-19 pandemic told lawmakers a surge in cases across America's Sun Belt from Florida to Arizona has them greatly concerned.
We are now seeing a disturbing surge of infections that looks like it's a combination, but one of the things is an increase in community spread. And that's something that I'm really quite concerned about.
The number of new cases broke records in over 8 states Monday, 2,000 in Arizona, 3,000 in Florida. Masks are now mandatory when out in public in Miami. Some bars forced to shut down in Texas. Arizona is running out of hospital beds. And the upcoming flu season, with COVID-19 still around, has these experts worried. They're urging all Americans to get a flu shot.
This single act will save lives.
Contradicting his staff,
I don't kid.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he wasn't joking at a Tulsa, Oklahoma rally when he said testing should be slowed down. These men say the president never told them to reduce testing. In fact, Trump's former testing czar wants more screening, 40 to 50 million tests a month by fall.
Especially now during reopening when the need for testing is the greatest.
Despite the virus surge in Arizona, the president visited the border wall in Yuma, turning his focus from the pandemic to a key rallying point of the campaign that got him elected, keeping immigrants out.
We have the best security wall ever built, and we'll have it completed very soon.
The president also has a campaign rally at a Phoenix megachurch, physically distancing and mask wearing not required. Both of these precautions are strongly encouraged by this panel until there's a vaccine. Dr. Fauci says large clinical trials will begin in July, and a vaccine could be available by the end of this year or early 2021. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Brazil's president has been ordered to wear a face mask while in public after repeatedly downplaying the risk of the new coronavirus. Jair Bolsonaro has been seen coughing while greeting crowds. The requirement to wear masks in Brazil came into force on April 30th, and today a federal judge ordered Bolsonaro to abide by it. If he doesn't, the president will face a daily fine of about $500. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says what he calls the long national hibernation in his country is over, and Brits can soon hit the pub again. Bars, restaurants, hair salons, and most other businesses can reopen on July 4th. The government is reducing the 2-meter physical distance rule to 1 meter. Experts fear that will effectively end physical distancing. The infection rate in the UK has been dropping, and Johnson says he doesn't believe the UK is at risk of being hit hard by a second wave. Mourners gathered at an historic church in Atlanta today for the private funeral of Rashard Brooks.
What a day it's gonna be!
A 27-year-old black man was shot twice in the back by a white officer in a Wendy's parking lot while he was running away. He was remembered today as a kind, fun-loving father of 4.
They thought that we were just upset for about 15 minutes, but we keep showing up. We keep saying America can be better than this. And can I tell you, keep showing up, keep marching, keep protesting, keep raising your voice, keep raising the issue.
Friends and family wore Black Lives Matter shirts and filled Ebenezer Baptist Church, a place where Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. once preached. Atlanta's police chief stepped down less than 24 hours after Brooks was killed, and the officer who shot him has been fired and charged with murder. In Quebec, 5 retired Catholic priests have been arrested at a retirement home, and they're facing sexual abuse charges that date back decades. The men, aged between 78 and 88, were arrested this morning in the city of Joliet, north of Montreal. They face more than 30 charges, including gross indecency, sexual assault, and molestation. The abuse is alleged to have happened while they were priests teaching at a high school and 2 other religious institutions between 1961 and 1989. Police investigators say 15 men have come forward saying they were abused by the men and they were minors at the time. The possibilities with pensions coming up, why Alberta is considering abandoning the Canada Pension Plan. The Canada Emergency Response Benefit, or CERB, has been extended now until the end of August, and it's been a lifesaver for many who lost their jobs. But the 2-month extension will come at a steep cost. The Parliamentary Budget Office estimates the additional 8 weeks of the CERB will cost about $18 billion. Add that to what's already been spent since the benefit was announced back in March, and the tab is predicted to top $71 billion. More than 8 million people have received CERB payments. Manitoba's government wants people to get off the CERB and get back to work. Some critics of the federal program say the $2,000 monthly payment is a disincentive for people to return to their jobs. Premier Brian Pallister is offering to temporarily top up their income. People who enroll in what's called the Manitoba Job Restart program will be eligible for an initial payment of $500 plus 3 additional biweekly payments of $500 each, a total of $2,000 over 6 weeks. Global's Brittany Greenslade joins us from Winnipeg with the details on why the Premier is offering to pay people to return to work.
Donna, Premier Brian Pallister says this is a much-needed incentive to get Manitobans back to work without a fear of missing out on financial assistance. Well, the Premier couldn't say how many people in our province are currently on CERB or the student equivalent. He did say he's been hearing from businesses who are unable to get employees back who are collecting that $2,000 a month benefit. Pallister says his program is meant to kick CERB to the curb and kickstart the economy.
To some, the CERB programs become a barrier, preventing them from safely returning to work on a more full-time basis. And this is making it more difficult here in Manitoba. So this program will make employers more likely able to attract people to come back and work because they can tell them, look, you don't have to worry about losing the $2,000. The provincial government's going to give you that money anyway.
Now, I spoke with one business owner today who said he's had employees refuse to come back to work and instead choose to stay on CERB. Now, he would normally have 38 employees at this time. He's currently at less than half of that, and they're doing what they can. Out of 8 interviews that they held, they hired 4 of those people. Only 1 showed up on their first day of work. And the Canadian Federation of Independent Business says right now in Manitoba, 40% of businesses are at their regular staffing levels. Donna?
All right, Brittany Greenslade in Winnipeg, thanks. Alberta is talking about making a bold move and ditching the Canada Pension Plan so it can be replaced with one of its own. A so-called Fair Deal panel has studied the idea and recommended an Alberta pension plan proceed, but this is not a new idea. There's lots of pushback to it, and there's a long road ahead before it happens. Tom Vernon joins me from Edmonton. Tom, let's start with why. Why is Premier Jason Kenney pushing the idea of an Alberta pension plan?
Don, it goes back to that idea of a fair deal, which is what the panel was looking at. Look, here in Alberta, there have long been frustrations with programs like equalization, and they've only intensified since the economy dipped into recession here a few years ago and deficits began to balloon. Now, Premier Kenney says there is some more leverage that can be found with Ottawa here, and an idea is to pull out of the Canada Pension Plan and putting Alberta's share of that money into a fund. It's estimated that would total about $40 billion, which could then be managed by the Alberta Investment Management Corporation. Now, this has sparked heated debate between Kenney's UCP government and the Alberta NDP.
Is this Premier really so intent on settling the score with Ottawa that he's willing to gamble the retirement plans and future of millions of Albertans?
Why is the NDP so desperately against having an in-depth study into the prospective benefits of an Alberta rather than Toronto-run pension plan?
Tom, this isn't the first time this idea has been studied. What are the experts who have looked into this saying about it?
Yeah, you're right, Donna. This was first explored back in the early 2000s. A lot of work has been done on this. Now, Premier Kenney says the idea behind this is Alberta has a young population. We pay more into the system than we're getting out right now. So he believes that we would actually be able to lower premiums or get higher rates if we went the Alberta way. Now, one of the foremost experts on pension management in the country wrote a paper on this in January, and he warned of the risks. The population is younger here because of a large influx of people in the oil and gas economy. Well, that has since shed thousands of jobs. He says Albertans need to be fully aware of both the positives and the negatives of this plan.
Demographics change, and you need to think about these things before you make any kind of moves that seem to favor you in the short term.
Now, Donna, as you mentioned, there's a long road ahead here. The Finance Department here in Alberta has been tasked to look into this idea, and if it goes forward, it would have to be through a referendum. Also of note, an internal government document shows that 2/3 of Canada's provinces, with 2/3 of the population, would also have to approve the move. Donna?
All right. Tom Vernon in Edmonton, thank you. Still ahead, a deadly earthquake rattles Mexico's core. People in Mexico City scrambled to the streets after a 7.4 magnitude earthquake shook buildings all over the capital. At least 2 people are known to have died. The quake's epicenter was more than 600 kilometers to the south in Oaxaca state, and it triggered a small tsunami. The Trump administration is considering reimposing tariffs on Canadian aluminum after accusations Canada is destroying what remains of the U.S. aluminum industry. The American Primary Aluminum Association claims there's been a surge in imports of Canadian aluminum, vital for producing planes, cars, and other products. A year ago, the Canadian government fought to remove levies on our metals. But as Mike LeCouture reports, Canada has since lost some leverage.
There have been surges on steel and aluminum, some from Canada, substantially from Canada.
Canadians have seen this movie before. U.S. lawmakers are once again talking tariffs when it comes to metals being imported from Canada. The decision to add a 10% levy could reportedly come by the end of the week.
If we, in fact, put the tariffs back on with those, they can't retaliate except in that sector. So they can't retaliate on agriculture and the like.
And that's key because the last time this happened in 2018, Canada was able to slap reciprocal tariffs on $16.6 billion worth of American goods, including playing cards and Kentucky bourbon. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland said in a statement they're talking to their American partners about this. However, the president of the Treasury Board issued this warning.
Protectionism still exists and, in fact, runs the risk of being even bigger and being an even greater threat as we emerge from the COVID health and economic crisis.
The COVID-19 crisis is the reason so much aluminum is on the market right now because not a lot of people were buying cars. And it's happened before.
It happened exactly the same way back in the great financial crisis of 2008 and 9. And it lasted for a certain period of time. As demand recovered, there was a shift back to value-added product.
Jean Simard also warns making Canadian aluminum more expensive could force American companies to get materials from Russia or the Middle East. And it just adds to our already frigid friendship with the U.S.
You know, it's on top of the border closure, which puts a strain on the relationship. There are a lot of strains here, and this certainly isn't helpful.
And it's yet another fire the Liberal government will now have to put out. Mike LeCouture, Global News, Ottawa.
Next, the Canadian boxer who stopped fighting in the ring to start fighting the pandemic. The FBI now says no charges will be laid after what was thought to be a noose was found in the garage of black NASCAR driver Bubba Wallace. Investigators conclude a garage door pull rope fashioned like a noose had been positioned there since as early as last fall, months before Wallace was assigned to the stall. That's Novak Djokovic partying days before it was confirmed the world's #1 tennis player has tested positive for COVID-19. Djokovic was criticized for hosting a competition in Serbia and Croatia on the weekend. 3 other players have now also tested positive. Canadian Kim Clavell has put her health on the line in an effort to help the vulnerable. She was on the cusp of boxing in her first main event when COVID-19 hit. As a trained nurse, she decided to take off the gloves, put her dream on hold, and help seniors living in long-term care. As Mike Armstrong explains, she's emerged stronger than ever.
She was just days away from the biggest fight of her career in March when the pandemic hit. It was supposed to be Kim Clavell's big breakout.
That was my first main event, my first fight with my new promoter, so that was big.
Now, the disappointment was strong, but only for about a day. Before boxing, Clavell was a nurse, and with COVID-19 ripping through seniors' residences, nurses were needed desperately.
I wanted to help and to make a difference, so I sent my CV everywhere.
Clavell jumped from residence to residence over 2 months. She lost track of how many. Some shifts were like nightmares, caring for dozens of people by herself. As a nurse, she'd worked in a maternity ward. This was very different.
I saw a lot of people die each day. 1 person, 2 person, and I never expected that.
With things calming down in residences, Clavell is now quarantined with her coach and training for a fight in July. But that breakout fight she missed that was supposed to raise her profile isn't going to be a problem. This was a recent surprise. ESPN asked her grandmother to tell her she had won its Pat Tillman Award for service. There is no ceremony this year. The presentation was online over the weekend.
Kim's story is inspiring, and it's one of service and great courage.
You're the engine that makes all things go.
Clavell's break from boxing is now news from CNN to People magazine. She's probably got a bigger profile than she could have ever hoped for. It's left her thankful, but also hungry to step back into the ring. She did do her best to stay in shape during her supposed time off. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
And that is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Cranbrook, BC, located just west of the Kootenay River. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.